In this video, I'm going to be showing you what I think is the best way to get started painting and collecting miniatures for Age of Sigmar. So if you're brand new to the hobby and have no idea what to do, by the end of this video you should have enough knowledge and understanding to get started in the Warhammer hobby. I'm going to be showing you the best products to get as a beginner, and then I'll be going into detail about how we can use them to get our Stormcast fully built and painted. And so you can follow along, this is an easy to follow step-by-step guide showing you all the steps and techniques you'll need, so by the end of this tutorial you'll have the confidence and knowledge to continue building and painting even more Stormcast once you're done. And if you stick around until the end, I'll show you some extra cool stuff we can do to make our Stormcast miniatures really stand out. Welcome to TableTopReady, my name's Michael, and this is going to be a complete beginner's guide so you can get the Stormcast half of the Age of Sigmar starter set built and painted. Here on TableTopReady, it's my goal to help you become a better miniature painter no matter what skill level you're starting from. All my tutorials are beginner friendly and I explain in detail the techniques I use in my videos, and all of the paints and brushes I use throughout this tutorial will be shown on the screen as I use them. And I'll also list everything I use in the description of this video, along with any hobby equipment I think you'll find useful, with affiliate links to where you can buy them. And before we get started, I do want to say a massive thank you to all the amazing people who've made this tutorial possible with their continued support. It allows me to get all the paints, brushes and miniatures I need to make these tutorials, so I can continue to help you get better at painting. As well, if you enjoy my content here on TableTopReady, then let me know by clicking that like button or leaving me a comment. I love reading them and hearing about your own hobby. Getting started in a new hobby, and especially miniature painting, can be really daunting. So I want to make things as easy as possible for you and help you get started on your journey into Age of Sigmar. My goal for this video is to make painting miniatures as easy as possible, and I want to limit myself to only using the Age of Sigmar paint and tool set, as well as a few items you may find lying around the house. And you'll be able to use everything from this tutorial to get the Skaven side of the starter set painted as well. In the paints and tool set, you get a great variety of 13 paints, a brush, clippers and a scraping tool, which I'll explain how to use later. As well as the paints in this set, I will be using some additional paints, so if you want to follow along with me and get the most out of this video, I'll also be using some Nuln Oil, Reikland Flesh Shade, Stormhost Silver and something called Lamy Medium, which I'll explain what it does later. Something else I recommend doing is buying some different brushes on top of the starter brush you get in the paints and tool set. Here I've got a small base brush, a small layer brush, a medium layer brush and a small dry brush. I recommend getting these brushes so we can better explore the different techniques I'll be showing you throughout this tutorial. Hobby tip: we don't want to use the same brush for everything. It's good to have a variety, and this means our brushes will last longer and they'll be in the best condition for the techniques intended. So along with the paints and tools we already have, I do suggest having some blue tack, paper towel, plastic shot glasses and items to make a wet palette. A wet palette has the ability to keep your paint usable for longer, as it doesn't dry up like it would on a dry palette. To make a wet palette you just need a container with a lid, some paper towel and baking paper. Place some folded up paper towel on the bottom of the container to start with, and you want to have a good layer of them, as this is what's going to hold the water. The amount of water you want is enough water so the paper towel is completely wet without having a puddle of water on the bottom of the container. We can then place a sheet of baking paper on top of the wet paper towel. I like to pre-cut a lot of sheets so we can easily and regularly change this out when we need to. There will be times I suggest using a dry palette, or if you prefer using a dry palette, then we can just blue tack some of our baking paper on top of our wet palette. It's important to know that our hobby supplies and tools don't need to be fancy, as long as they allow us to do what we want to do. And if we do find that we like using these products, then we can upgrade them later to something more fancy. When it comes to getting your miniatures built and painted, the very first thing you're going to need is a space or an area you feel comfortable, so you can enjoy your hobby time, and it wants to be well lit so you can see what you're doing. And when you've found somewhere, you want to keep it clean and tidy, as it can get messy. So something I like to do is use the box insert and have it so one of the sides of the box folds down. This creates a space you don't have to worry about getting messy, and you can pack it away easily when you're not hobbying. So now I've gone through everything you'll need throughout this video, I think we can get started, which means getting all of our miniatures built and ready for painting. In our starter set, you're going to find a bunch of sprues your miniatures are still attached to, and I know it's tempting to get stuck in and start cutting the parts off the sprues, but take some time first of all to go through the instructions. The instructions are full of information you'll need to build your miniatures. Each part is clearly numbered with detailed images showing you the best order to put the parts together. When you're confident enough with the instructions and how you want to build your miniatures, the next thing to do is to remove our parts from the sprue. Whenever we're putting miniatures together, we want to take our time, and we want to make sure that we fully understand the instructions before we start building anything, and doing this is going to help us avoid making any mistakes. First of all, we want to make sure you have the correct part, and once you've done this, we can use our clippers to remove it from the sprue. When we're using our clippers, we always want to keep the flat side towards the part we're removing to avoid damaging the parts. Once you've done that, take a look at each part, and you'll notice that where you've cut the connections it doesn't look very good, and you'll also see mould lines which we want to clean up. For this we have our scraping tool, and this is used to scrape away and remove all of those blemishes. Make sure to take your time when cleaning up your parts for assembly. We only want to use a small amount of pressure when using our scraping tool, so we don't remove any excess plastic we shouldn't be. Hobby tip: you can either cut and clean the parts as you follow the instructions, or cut all the pieces off that you'll need first and clean them all together. Just make sure you keep the parts organised. Something I haven't talked about is glue, and this is because these miniatures are designed to push together and be assembled without it. If you do want to use glue, I recommend using polycement or plastic glue. This type of glue is specifically designed to work with plastic by mounting the contact surfaces, creating a weld between the two parts once it's dried to create a very strong bond. Spend some time now getting everything assembled ready for painting. As well as getting all of our miniatures fully assembled, it's going to be a good idea to get them undercoated, which is really going to help when it comes to getting them painted. To undercoat your miniatures, we can use these coloured sprays. Just make sure to follow the instructions on the tin and use them outside or in a well ventilated area. I really suggest watching my Getting Miniatures Ready for Painting, where I'll go into detail about the whole process. To help make undercoating your miniatures easier, you can use some blue tack and stick them to a ruler or something similar. This lets us easily move and rotate the miniatures around so we can get to all those awkward areas with the spray. And once you've sprayed your miniatures, make sure to let your miniatures fully dry for a couple of hours before doing anything else with them. I've chosen to undercoat our Stormcast with Retributor armour, but the Skaven you get in the starter set I would use Wraithbone. I've chosen these colours because they create a great starting point for how we're going to end up painting all of our miniatures. So now we've fully assembled and undercoated all of our Stormcast miniatures, we can finally get started and learn how to paint them. Miniature painting is a massive part of the Warhammer hobby, so I want to make sure that we understand the very basics and fundamentals of painting miniatures, which is going to give us a great foundation to build upon when we do more advanced stuff later on. The best place to start when painting our miniatures is to work on getting all of our base colours painted first. This lets us spend time choosing what colours we want to paint everything, and painting becomes less overwhelming as we've created a great starting point to work from. Let's start by getting all of our Stormcast armour painted, and for this we're using Retributor armour. And I know we already undercoated our miniatures with Retributor undercoat, but the sprays don't always match the colour from the pot with the same name. So this means we get the colour we actually want, and we can get to areas we may have missed with the spray, and it won't be so noticeable if we need to neaten up and tidy up any mistakes along the way. The brush I'm using is our small base brush, but you can use the starter brush if you don't have the brush I recommend. Let's use our chosen brush to take some paint from the pot and put it on our palette, and we're going to add some water to the paint which is going to thin it down, and you want about the same amount of water as there is paint. Controlling the consistency of your paint is the most important thing you're going to learn as a beginner and as an experienced painter. Something else I like to do is to remove excess paint from the brush on some paper towel first, which helps give us more control over how much paint is deposited. And when we're ready to start painting, we want to keep our brush moving and avoid going over any areas we've already painted to prevent creating any unwanted texture whilst the paint is still drying. Then once you're done, because we thinned our paint, it won't have covered so well, so we'll need to paint another layer using the same process. Painting in multiple layers like this means we can get a strong base colour without losing any details. We just need to make sure each layer has fully dried first before applying another one. It's important we learn the very basics of applying paint to our miniatures, because not only does it create a great foundation for other techniques that we use later, but we also end up with better looking miniatures. When you're done with your first base colour, you'll have had some practice, so let's work on getting all of the other details painted as well. Let's continue painting the silver details next using the lead belcher, and remember to follow the same process for other colours as we did with our gold, including thinning them down. Let's use some Cantor blue next to paint their pauldrons and shields, as well as any cloaks your Stormcast may have. Before you do that though, you may want to change out your water after using any metallic paints. Hobby tip: something we might find useful is having something we can hold on to whilst painting. Here I'm using some plastic shot glasses. This is because having a painting handle or attaching the miniature to something to hold on to makes painting more comfortable and prevents us from touching our miniatures too much. Once you're done getting those details painted, let's work on our white details next, painting these using Corex white. And we want to paint any iconography, these ring details on the shields, any wings, and the inside of any cloaks want to be Corex white as well. And we also want to get any flames painted as well, ready for later. Some of the other details you may find yourself painting is the material under the armour, which is painted using Abaddon black, and we can use our Abaddon black to paint any inner robes our characters are wearing. We are limiting what paints we're using to keep everything more affordable, so to get some colours we are going to have to mix some, but I will tell you when I do, and to keep it simple I'll be using an equal amount of both. There are some colours that we don't have, so we can mix our paints to get the colours we want. So for any leather straps and scabbards we can mix an equal amount of Steel Legion drab and Abaddon black. For those shields and trims and other details that are a much lighter gold, we can use an equal amount of both Retributor armour and Stormhost silver. If you ever want help deciding how to paint things and what colour they should be, I like to head over to the Warhammer website where they have loads of images and turnarounds. As well, whilst we're painting, we do want to try and be as neat as possible, but it's okay if we do make mistakes. All we need to do is neaten things back up with our base colours. Doing this is going to really help make our miniatures stand out and look even better. Any weapon handles, gems and any top knots are painted with Corm red. Parchment and scroll details are painted using an equal mix of Corex white and Rakkar flesh. And when it comes to painting skin, for a light tone we can use an equal mix of Bugman's Glow and Corex white. For a darker tone of skin, let's mix an equal amount of Steel Legion drab and Abaddon black together. Paint the hair however you want. Finally, for the Griff Crow we can paint its fur with Abaddon black. There's a lot of time and effort going into painting our miniatures, so don't expect to be able to sit down and get them finished in just one sitting. And we're going to get the most out of our hobby when we take our time and enjoy the process. And when we're done, we're going to end up with some miniatures we can be really proud of. We've now had plenty of practice just getting some basic colours painted on our miniatures, which is pretty much 60% of what miniature painting is, and I think we're now ready to move on to learning some more of the skills and techniques that are used. At the moment our miniatures are looking pretty flat, so to make them more exciting to look at, we want to start bringing out all of those details and features which we're going to be doing in this section of the video. Definition is created to bring out all of the details on our miniatures, making them look less flat and more interesting to look at. Let's start by using one of our shades, and we can apply this over our Stormcast armour, which is going to bring out all of those details, making them easy to see. For this we use a Rycliffe flesh shade, which can be used straight out of the pot without being thinned down. We're using our starter brush for this, and when applying the Rycliffe flesh shade, we want to use enough to cover our miniatures comfortably, so we can flow into all those recesses and shallow details, but we do want to avoid it pulling up too much in areas where we don't want it to. If you do see this happening, then we can use our brush to remove any excess we don't want, and we'll need to keep an eye on it as it fully dries. Once our shade is fully dried, we can see what a difference it's made, and now we can continue to work with our shades to create even more definition and interest. Using shades and washes are a great way to create definition very easily and quickly, but it's important to remember that they can be very messy, and they can also dull and affect the colours that we use them over. Now our first shade is dried, let's use our Norn oil and apply this over our silver details, and at the same time we can apply this over our belts, any areas we painted blue, including any cloaks, and we can also use our Norn oil to add definition to our weapon handles and top knot. After that we want to create definition on our parchment and scroll details, and for this we're going to mix an equal amount of both Agrak Surf shade and some Lamy medium. Lamy medium is like paint without the colour, and using Lamy medium means the shade will still behave and flow in a way it's supposed to, which water could affect. We're doing this because we don't want to overpower our base colour, getting a more subtle effect. We can do this again for any white details, this time thinning some Norn oil with an equal amount of Lamy medium. The last thing we need to create definition on is any skin you may have painted, and we can use Reikland Flesh shade for the lighter skin tone and Norn oil for any darker skin tones. Again, take your time deciding how you want everything to look. I'm just here to show you how you can do it, and the important thing is to have fun with it. Once you're done applying any shades and everything is fully dried, we can look at how we can get everything highlighted. The idea behind highlighting is to bring out any edges, areas and raised details to draw our attention to them and to make these features stand out more. One of the ways we can achieve this is with a dry brush, and it's this method that's shown to beginner painters because it's a way to get those highlights with very little effort in a short amount of time. We're using Stormhost Silver, and let's use our small dry brush and put some of the paint on the paper towel and then work it into the bristles to start with. Now we want to remove as much of that paint as you can until it's not coming off onto the paper towel anymore. This is going to help pick out the raised areas and edges easily. When you're ready, you want to move your brush against the details you want to create highlights. At the moment we just want to work on highlighting the gold and silver details. What's happening is the paint is being deposited right on the edges and raised areas, and it's not being allowed to get into any of those shallower details. Even though dry brushing is quick and easy, it can look messy, so this is why we're using a small dry brush, because it's easier to control where these highlights are created, as we want to do our best and not get it on any areas we've already painted. But we can just neaten these areas back up if we need to. As good as a job our dry brush has done to bring out all those edges and details, it's a messy process, so I want to show you what I consider to be the most important technique to learn, which is line highlighting. Highlighting is a great way to get a large amount of miniatures with lots of details highlighted, but it can be messy. When we're ready to do some line highlights, we want to create a lighter shade of our base colour to highlight with. Let's do some line highlights for any blue details, first mixing some Corex white with an equal amount of Cantor blue. And before we get started, there are some things I want to show you to make this easier to do. For this technique, let's use our small layer brush, which is better suited for this task. Again, we want to thin our paint and remove any excess from the bristles using some paper towel. This is going to give us more control over how much paint is deposited, because what we don't want are thick blobby lines. The idea behind highlighting is to paint lines on edges and raise detail to draw our attention to them and to make these features stand out more. We can make things easier if you have a lot of edges to highlight by angling your brush against an edge and running your brush along it to create the highlight. For places you can't do this, then we just need to take our time painting thin lines along edges and details you want to highlight. Hobby tip: something I regularly like to use is a pair of reading glasses. These really help us to see what we're doing, as most of the time we're dealing with really small details, and you'll really notice a difference when you can actually see what your brush is doing. Now you've line highlighted your first details, let's move on to some other details that need highlighting. Leather straps and scabbards can be highlighted using our Steel Legion drab. Corn red is again mixed with an equal amount of corn red to highlight red details. We can go a step further with those gems as well, painting little dots of Corex white on the points of any gem to help them really stand out. Let's mix together an equal amount of Abaddon black and Corex white to highlight any black details next, including our Griff Crow. To highlight those scroll details and parchment, let's mix our Corex white with an equal amount of Rakarth flesh again. I will always say that line highlighting is one of the most important techniques to really practice and get good at. Not only will it help to improve the look of our miniatures, but it also helps to improve our brush control and hand-eye coordination, making us better miniature painters overall. We've learnt a lot whilst getting our miniatures painted, but it means we've created a great foundation of knowledge that you can take away and use on future projects. I want to finish up this video showing you how to paint some of the more fun things, and how we can make our Stormcast more interesting, making more of an impact. Something we've not done yet is paint the flames, which have a nice gradient of colour on them. For our first colour, we want to create light blue colour, and we can make this using 1 part Cancel Blue with 3 parts Corax White, and this is painted over all the flames to start with. We then want to create an equal mix of Cancel Blue and Corax White to give us a darker colour and start a little further way up our flames. At the halfway point we can use just Cancel Blue. Finally painting the tips of our flames with just Abaddon Black. Finish by highlighting our flames, painting the raised parts of the flames with Corax White. It's always worth spending the extra time and effort adding interest and character to our miniatures, and it's these details that tend to be more fun to paint, so even if you're new to painting, I would still give it a go. The next details we can add interest to are all the pieces of parchment which you may expect to see prayers and blessings written. To give the impressions of text on our parchment, we can create a dark brown colour and paint little wiggly dotted lines. We can angle our miniatures to make doing this more comfortable, and this is using the same approach in brush control as we use for painted line highlights. For the bottom of any robes and material, we can stipple some Agrax Earth shade where it's dragged in mud and dirt. When stippling, take your time and build this up slowly for best results. We've now finished getting everything painted, and the only thing left to do is their bases. To do the bases, we're going to be using Astro Granite, which is a technical paint. It's great to use on bases because when it dries it has this texture to give the impression of dirt and gravel. All we need to do is take some of the Astro Granite straight from the pot and just spread it around. And when the Astro Granite has fully dried, you'll be able to see the texture it's created. But we can take this a step further, first by painting the texture using our Steel Legion drab. Next, let's bring out all that texture with our Agrax Earth shade. And once the Agrax Earth shade is dried, let's give it a dry brush of Rakarth Flesh. Finally, we can paint the rim of any bases using Steel Legion drab, which means we've finished our miniatures. We've now finished painting all of our Stormcast, and along the way we've learned a lot about painting miniatures and the techniques used, and we've even been able to add interest, making our miniatures more interesting. So let's see how they turned out. But before we see the reveal, I do want to take a moment to thank Knex, Nick, George Wright, Giovanni Bonamelli, James Dorwood, Heimdall STB, Ballistic, Mark Slays, Alexander Voloshin, and Antonio Larilli, who have all recently become supporters or has donated to the channel. Thank you so much. And if you enjoy the content here on TableTopReady and want to help support the channel as well, you can become a channel member or join my Patreon, which not only helps me create this content, it also gives you access to our Discord along with access to lots of other perks for as little as £2 a month. And for every tier you'll also get tutorials early and be kept up to date with what I'm up to behind the scenes. Our Stormcast are now fully painted and ready for games of Age of Sigmar, and hopefully I've been able to give you the confidence and knowledge to get your own Stormcast painted and continue on to paint and collect even more. I've got plenty of other tutorials on the channel, including how to paint the Skaven half of the starter set, and you can even see the different ways you can paint your Stormcast, so make sure to go and check those out as well. I really do enjoy making these tutorials and I hope you find them useful. If you do, then please leave a like and let me know in the comments below. As well, make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out on future content, and I'll see you in the next video.